Good evening, class. This is Mr. Stansel, and I hope you are having a good evening. Tonight we're going to be talking about the three different categories of psychoactive drugs. All right, so let's begin. First of all, why are these drugs called psychoactive drugs? The reason is because the work that's conducted by these drugs takes place within the synapse. And as you remember from last unit, hopefully, the synapse is the area between the end bulb of a neuron and the dendrite of the next neuron. Right? So this is where neural communication takes place. So that's why they're called psychoactive, because it impacts our neural communication. So we have three types of drugs. We have depressants, stimulants, and hallucinogens. So let's go ahead and start differentiating how these drugs impact neural communication. The first drug we're going to discuss, or the first category anyway, is the category of depressants. And depressants it's somewhat misleading. Depressants do not make you feel depressed. In fact, what depressants do is they depress or reduce neural activity. Okay, they also slow down body functions. All right, so it's slowing down neural communication. That's what depressants does. Probably the most popular depressant in the United States anyway is alcohol. And the effects of alcohol typically impact memory formation, decision making, and impulse control. So what parts of the brain are those? Do you remember from last unit? Memory formation, talk about the hippocampus. Decision making and impulse control, we're talking about the frontal lobe there. Don't forget, the frontal lobe is also where the motor cortex is located, so this is often why alcoholics tend to stumble and lack motor coordinations. Again, we slow body functions. Other depressants are barbiturates, also known as tranquilizers. And these drugs, just like alcohol, they depress neural activity of the central nervous system, so the brain and spinal cord, and they also reduce anxiety, so they make you feel a little bit better, but they impair memory and judgment, so it might lead to bad decision making. All right. Here are a few specific barbiturates, but for the sake of the AP exam and for our test, they're not as significant. Opiates are another type of depressant. The more common opiates, also opium, are morphine and heroin. Okay, and what these drugs do is they depress neural activity. Again, it's a depressant, and because they're opiates, they temporarily lessen pain and anxiety. Remember, we have naturally produced opiates in our body. They're called endorphins. All right? This is why too much heroin use over time will diminish our naturally producing opiates, also known as endorphins, and this oftentimes leads to a physical dependence. Okay, so as you see here on this last bullet, with enough artificial opiates, the brain stops producing its own opiates. What are they again? That's right, endorphins. All right. So here's a picture of the poppy plant. This is where heroin comes from. Okay, if you look closer at the cut on the poppy plant, this sap is what is dried and hardened and then eventually processed to produce heroin. So this leads us to our next category of drugs, which are stimulants. All right? Stimulants are pretty much the opposite of depressants. Whereas depressants slow down neural activity and slow down body functioning, stimulants do the opposite. They excite neural activity and they speed up our body functionings. What are the most common stimulants, you think? I'll give you a hint. They're legal. The most popular stimulant in the world is caffeine. That's right. When you drink sodas, you are ingesting a drug. You're ingesting a stimulant. Just important, little fun fact to note, Brian Lewis Saunders is a painter, and he paints self-portraits while on different drugs, so you might notice a few of his paintings as we go through this presentation. Other stimulants are amphetamines and methamphetamines. And these are essentially, chemically, they are pretty much the same, almost identical. The only difference is that methamphetamine is a much more powerful version than amphetamine. Methamphetamine is a much more concentrated recipe than amphetamine is. So methamphetamine has a much stronger effect on you physically and neurologically. Okay. And also, over time, methamphetamine appears to reduce baseline dopamine levels. Okay. Another important note for amphetamine and methamphetamine is that it increases wakefulness and focus, and it decreases fatigue and appetite. So if it decreases appetite, but it increases wakefulness and focus, that essentially is saying that you are burning more calories than you're taking in. So oftentimes meth addicts will appear to be sick or appear to be ill, and you're going to see pictures of that here in a second. So the reason for this, reason for just the terrible effects of methamphetamine can really be demonstrated in its ingredients. I mean, for example, we have Drano here. Some of the other ingredients are ammonia, which is incredibly poisonous. Lithium from batteries, brake fluid. These are not chemicals you really want to put in your body. Right? So here we see an individual. She's in her early 30s to mid 30s, and this is her 2.5 years later. This is the same woman. This is what methamphetamine will do to you, because again, you're burning more calories than you're taking in, so it leaves you looking sickly and malnourished, as you see in this picture. Here's another example. Again, methamphetamine is a stimulant. Meth addicts find it very difficult to sit still. They have to constantly be moving, constantly be active. This is why meth addicts appear to be thinner. They appear to be malnourished because, again, they're burning more calories than they're taking in. They cannot sit still. Neurologically, their brain functioning will not allow them to sit still. They have to constantly be doing something. Because of this need to constantly be moving, constantly be active, meth addicts will typically grind their teeth if they're bored or have nothing else to do, or they'll pull out, as is the case for this meth addict. You see, she had really nothing else to do, but she was on meth. She had to do something, so she pulled out her own hair. And whoa, really bad meth addict right here. Okay? Let me know in class if you get this inside joke. Another stimulant is cocaine. Biologically, cocaine acts as what is called a triple reuptake inhibitor, also known as a TRI. And what this does is it blocks the reuptake of 3 neurotransmitters. It blocks the reuptake of serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine. And if you remember, serotonin, if we have a lot of it, it gives us a sense of euphoria. We feel great. Dopamine also relates to mood. And if you remember norepinephrine, this is essentially adrenaline. So serotonin reuptake is being blocked, so we feel euphoric. Dopamine reuptake is being blocked, so we feel jittery. Remember, dopamine is general body movement, so we feel jittery, we feel good, not just emotionally, but also physically. And then norepinephrine is adrenaline. It gives us that surge of energy that is characteristic of cocaine users. If you look at this self-portrait, the person on cocaine has a hard time keeping focus. We see that with a random jet ski here. It looks like he's doing math equations here in the background. And then he just keeps, it looks like he goes over lines over and over again. You see the dark shading. Because he has to constantly be moving and aroused. It is addictive because of its effect on the metabolic reward pathway, mesolimbic reward pathway that's located just inside the limbic system. Okay, so this gives it that addictive. This gives it that addictive effect. Another stimulus is ecstasy, also known as MDMA. It does have mild hallucinogenic properties, but it is characterized as a stimulant. It produces euphoria and social intimacy. It's built with short-term health risks and longer-term harm to serotonin-producing neurons. So this will, if you use this too long, it will stop. Your body will stop producing the natural serotonin neurotransmitters. And this leads us to our last category of drugs, hallucinogens. And hallucinogens are different than the other two, much different. And the reason that it is because they excite a region of the brain, a very specific region called the locus coeruleus, also known as the LC. And a single neuron from the LC can branch to many different parts of the brain. So it can start in the occipital lobe and then move its way to the frontal lobe and then temporal lobe or parietal lobe. And it's that characteristic that gives hallucinogens its really bizarre effect. For example, LSD, probably the most powerful hallucinogen known today. It has a significant impact on our complex sensory systems. So, for example, we might be able to taste sounds, or might be able to hear colors, or see sound waves in the walls, for example. It kind of blends our sensory information. And then our last hallucinogen is is known as delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, but more commonly known as marijuana, whose main ingredient is THC. This is what gives it its hallucinogenic properties. And marijuana actually mimics naturally occurring cannabinoids in our brain, which excites the flow of dopamine into the synapse. So it gives us it gives us a good mood feeling. All right. However, because it does impact our limbic system and the interior of the brain, it does affect short-term memory loss as well as slowing down motor coordinations. And it's just some body effects of marijuana: reddening of the eyes, dryness of the mouth, and then relaxation of the muscles, which is why marijuana is usually associated with laziness or lack of motivation. All right. Okay, well, that's the end of my little talk, my little spiel here. Make sure you can differentiate the three categories of drugs and how those categories of drugs impact neural communication and impact our behavior. All right, make sure you know that because it will come in handy tomorrow in class. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great night.